presenting on. Tonight we're going to have Shokai presenting on the precept, do not misuse sexuality, and Emelie presenting on the precept around do not speak dishonestly. One thing on schedule, just a heads up, next week I'll be giving a Dharma talk on Naihan. We'll be celebrating or commemorating the death of the Buddha. And then precept study will resume on February 16th with Penny and Choan, and I will be absent for that class. I'll be in retreat at that class. So some oddities in the near future, but just wanted to give you all a heads up. With that in mind, Shokai, take it away.
So remain faithful in relationships. Do not misuse sexuality. The first thing that occurs to me is, how do you bring a monastic vow of chastity, which was at the beginning for all the arhats and bodhisattvas following the Buddha? How do you bring a monastic vow of chastity into a lay disciple's life? What are you going to call it? We have this translation. Roshi Baker, one of my sources says, look at some of the other translations of this adultery, impure sexuality, sexual misconduct, unchaste conduct. Where would you put this precept? Those are heavy words. What do you think? Is that a good trend? Prefer another translation? Infidelity?
Is that, are you asking for?
I'm throwing it out for your open mics. Yep.
I would say this inauthenticity or dishonesty.
Uh-huh. By that you mean you're not presenting your true self?
Or just being dishonest in the relationship about your intentions or about your actions or about your feelings.
And I was looking at the not coveting or creating a veneer of attachment is the precept of not misusing sexuality. So getting attached to people, not necessarily sexually, but I just wonder about that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I was looking at the word veneer. Like you're putting something forward that's false to your own self. I think this relates to what Teiko just said.
Mm-hmm.
That okay, I love you, I love you, I love you, let's go to bed. And it's not. How about greed, grasping, desire instead of attachment?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot in our lessons about grasping.
I kind of like the attachment. I know attachment leads to suffering, but I like being attached to my husband. I mean, I don't have to hold on to him, but I like the idea of maybe that's fidelity, but it's more than that. It's having a a stronger connection with one person.
Sounds good. Yeah, that's the positive side of attachment. This is phrased more in the negative, but I see it as a positive. I agree.
Mhm.
Any others?
Well, it doesn't say don't be attached. It says, I mean, Buddhism says not to be attached, but that precept just says don't have a veneer of attachment. As you said, don't have a false friend.
Yeah, I see veneer
Yeah.
as false.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You know, I think it has a lot to do with are you causing harm? You know, there's a lot of people that have open relationships. They may have more than one partner. They may be dating. And in those scenarios, they may be having intimate relations with several people at the same time. And they don't, they may not even have any intention at all of having a committed or long-term relationship with that person, you know, going deeper, partnership, marriage. I think as far as long as kind of go into what Taco's saying, being authentic, being honest, um, not leading somebody down a road that you have no intention on leading them down. Um, I think that's where, you know, you're creating harm to another person, you're creating suffering. And so I think that's when it gets into the misuse. And when you're creating harm to either yourself or another being. You know, I don't even know that I've ever really even heard in Buddhist teaching anything that really is directed to you're only supposed to be with one person at one time. You know, I don't even think that I've ever even heard teachings or discussions about that. I guess I could dive in deeper and see if there is some, but I really think it really goes to what the intention is. And are you creating harm to yourself or anybody else? That's kind of where I go with this precept.
That's I thought so. That occurred to me too. But the ungilded Dharma might reveal the ungilding part might reveal that you've created harm.
In Buddhism, I think our small self, whatever partnership we're in long term, is like always having things from our perspective. And that's not really much of a partnership in terms of family unit. And so when we only see the small self always getting its way, that's attachment to things our way, or the ego taking over. So of course, fidelity is a warmer word, and as you said, the taking any vice too far, becomes the virtue again. It's like a continuum.
So I want to come back through that, Ruth Ann. Taking fidelity too far or taking infidelity too far? What?
Sorry, I meant like attachment can be a good thing, but it can, any virtue can go too far, it becomes a vice. It's good to be generous in a way, then you become so generous, you have no sense of a higher self, a place to go, to take, so it's true for any kind of thing like attachment. You can be so attached to something that there's no positive self, outer, bigger self left to take to anything else. That you can't lose something you haven't become in touch with. I didn't mean to get you off your track of your taking us through this. Thank you for this.
No, I'm following as well as leading. This ungilded Dharma, I like the ungilding part, this revealing, I think, of taking off things that are creating a veneer. But as Choan was saying, this is not uncommon. And besides, there are a lot of people who are not in committed relationships, right? This doesn't seem to speak there. Chastity is a committed relationship. And that just occurred to me as I was studying this precept. But I would.
Chastity is a committed relationship with whom?
Good point.
Oneself?
I suppose, at least that. One's values, one's faith. I was thinking also then, so is if your sexual conduct actually is causing suffering, yourself or others, and you find that out, coming to light, there you are in zazen with this knowledge, I guess you'd have to say. You've been caught out, and you've got some difficult choices ahead. We live with these precepts that call us to notice, inquire what's going on at the moment. We want to be skillful.
I think too, something that comes up for me with working with the population that I work with, many times sexuality is used for control. It's used in ways to control or tempt other people to influence them. So that kind of comes up for me too. I think that just, like I said, working with the population that I work with, it's not always a mutual agreement between the two people, and how it is used in the relationship can be.
We could extrapolate that to any other population, like I'm stepping into a horrible mess here of white versus of Anglo-Saxon Protestant, even Protestant, versus or compared to other ethnicities. Am I right? Is that where you're going, or you're thinking? At any rate, I think we're probably, or I, as a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, reared, all those values I've got. Yeah, probably do that.
I like the ungilded word as well, Shokai. And I used to kind of struggle with that a little bit because I wondered, does that mean I'm not supposed to wear makeup or make or you know, try to look nice or wear cute clothes.
No,
You know?
I'm in the Zen metaphor area. That never wouldn't have occurred to me that
Well, I see
ungilded is.
ungilded as meaning nothing extra. Don't put. It's just be who you are. Just be who you are. It's perfect. No, and
Yeah, but recognize that maybe who you are needs some improvement. You're what was it he said? You're perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement.
Or you're perfect just as you are, and you're someone who likes cute shoes. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just something that I've sometimes wondered about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just I was thinking also about the ungilded Dharma. This is kind of a weird precept, because I just feel like I feel judgment when I read this, not that I always, I've always been faithful, but I think maybe because my parents are divorced and there's just kind of like a lot of stuff there for me. But so it's kind of a weird precept for me. It's always been a really weird precept for me, but this ungilded Dharma, again, I come back to those first few phrases, the first phrasing in the precept, that first bit. I just kind of keep having to remind myself that first part of the precept is talking about that inexplicable realm that, our Buddha nature, that realm that we don't have to try to do anything to get there. It's already there. It's like it's a realm that exists that's already there.
Bingo. I wrote down there is no refraining. Then no not refraining. You're
so
already there. You
myself.
awaken to the fact that you are already there. Nothing to desire because you're there. Let's hope.
You've got 1 minute, Shokai.
It's about time, but yeah. I do have the three wheels are empty. There is nothing to desire. This is the way of the Buddhas. The three wheels, Roshi says, they are body, mouth, and consciousness. I wonder if that's just her take or not. What the heck are the three wheels? Pure and clear. I'll leave you with that. Think on it. Go ahead.
Hey, good. Did you have one last thought before we shift to Emelie?
Giver, receiver, and gift, which I think is sort of a lovely way to think
Giver,
of the
receiver, and gift.
three wheels in terms of sexuality.
It must mean something, because then we have Tricycle, which is the Buddhist magazine. So that must be talking about the three wheels.
Off we go for the three wheels.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
So I usually like to share slides when I'm presenting stuff. In lieu of slides, I made one slide that has the fourth grave precept on it. I like to look at things. So the fourth grave precept is do not speak dishonestly, communicate truthfully. In the realm of the inexplicable Dharma, putting forth not one word is the precept of not speaking dishonestly. The Dharma wheel turns from the beginning. There is neither surplus nor lack. The sweet dew covers the earth, and within it lies the truth. So looking more at what we see here, the Bodhidharma section is that sort of is the first commentary there. In the realm of the inexplicable Dharma, putting forth not one word is the precept of not speaking dishonestly. And you can't really put something that's inexplicable into words, not even one word. And so we're already seeing here that this is something that we can't do if we're speaking, period. Dogen's response is more poetic and beautiful to me, I guess. The Dharma wheel turns from the beginning. There's neither surplus nor lack. We don't have to make stuff up. The truth is the truth. And that second line about the sweet dew covering the earth just makes me think of like crisp, dewy mornings. And when the sun comes up and just illuminates everything, and all the little tiny beads of truth are just everywhere. When I was getting ready to do this, I started looking at, well, what did other people do? Because, you know, other people are smarter than me on this. So I looked at some of our past presentations, and I really loved what Teiko had to say in her presentation. She said, if there was ever a time to simply hold up a flower and not say anything, this would be it. And when I read this precept in the commentary in its entirety, that's exactly what I think. And I think it's a beautiful way of expressing it. So I wanted to ask everyone here, for you, what comes to mind for you when you read this precepts? Anyone who's willing to share what comes to mind?
Well, the first one anyway, if I don't open my mouth, I'm not going to speak dishonestly. If I just shut up, that's it. I don't think that's necessarily being recommended, but that's one take on it.
Yeah, it seems unrealistic, right? It's like, gee, if I don't talk, it's all good. But if I don't talk, then lots of other stuff is not going to happen in my life. Yeah.
I think what always comes up for me with this one is that sometimes you have to speak dishonestly. Sometimes you have to lie. I mean, it's something that I always go back to, just the simplest of, you know, your 95-year-old grandma has cooked you something for dinner and worked on it all day long. And she flat out ask you if you like it, and you don't, you're going to tell her you did. You know, there's just no purpose in telling her that you don't. I mean, maybe if you think, well, if I don't tell her I don't like it, she's going to keep cooking it for me every week for the next however long. But I just think sometimes there's scenarios that you can't stay quiet, and it's more compassionate to lie.
Yeah, I agree.
And I guess you just live with the karma of that, whatever that is.
Getting that meal fed to you again every week for the next however many weeks.
Live with it. No, I like the neither surplus nor lack. You don't have to fib in order to get what you need. You've already got it, or you can get along without it. I mean, there are a lot of false desires, which we call greed, hate, and delusion.
Very true. Other thoughts?
I like to think about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, it's all right. You go first.
Well, I like to think about instances when it's more compassionate to break the precepts as well. And the one that I always think of is, are you hiding any Jews in your basement? So,
Yeah. There are definitely different kinds of lies, right? Not all dishonesties are harmful dishonesties. There are some dishonesties that are actually beneficial. Did anyone else have any last minute additions before I move on?
I was
Peter
going to
had
add.
something.
Yeah, I was going to add. I've got to say that I actually quite like Thich Nhat Hanh's take on all the 5 precepts, and particularly on the last one, which was about the issue of loving. And with Thich Nhat Hanh's version, it's all in positive terms rather than negative. Like rather than being a "you will not," they're all phrased in terms of the positive. So with the issue of sexual misconduct, it's phrased in terms of true love. And this one, they phrase in terms of loving speech and deep listening. And rather than being about not speaking dishonestly and communicating truthfully, it's about being mindful of unmindful speech. And I think that gets to the issue too, what Takeo and Joanne raised. And even like there was an issue, I was in a group the other day, and they were talking about loving kindness, and it was all sort of, loving kindness, and, World Loving Kindness Day. And there's an issue here in Australia that the Prime Minister of Australia, who's been an absolute warmonger, who wants to buy nuclear submarines, and has also been doing all these things which are just horrible to people. Then in the middle of all of this controversy on World Loving Kindness Day or World Kindness Day, he's there promoting kindness. And my view, which I expressed, and it's rather was in being controversial, just throwing it out there, is, well, what does really loving kindness mean? Is it just like the word nice? There's 35 meanings for it in the dictionary. And so, I'm going to be nice to that person. Well, I might be nice to them for a few hours, and politics is absolutely toxic, but it does raise that issue of, well, is that kindness a selfless kindness? Is it a kindness which is about not causing harm or suffering? Which that is raised in the Metta Sutta. And I'm getting off track here, but for me, the issue of mindful speech or unmindful speech can be phrased in a much more interesting way, which comes back to your own responsibility.
Yeah, and what the intent is and whether or not harm results in it, and all of that is involved in it, right?
Yeah, anyway, thank
you, Peter.
I was just I was just thinking about the, putting forth not one word, and it made me think of maybe pausing before you say something, what, instead of just reacting to whatever it is, like, how do you like this dress? Well, you might lie and say you love it, but pausing and thinking about the repercussions of that one word or those words or whatever. So being mindful, I think, is what I was thinking of.
Yeah, definitely. And when we think about the different ways, or the different kind of thinking about mindfulness and the different ways that we can be dishonest, We can think about things like bold-faced lies, which are often connected to the other precepts, like the misuse of sexuality. You're probably lying to somebody if you're misusing sexuality, or if you're probably lying to somebody if you're stealing. So often these things are connected very strongly with the other precepts, truthfulness, that is. The other piece of it, or one of the other pieces of it, is gossiping, and that goes back to mindful speech too. Often we can find ourselves just repeating things that we've heard without knowing if there's any validity to them. I'll tell a little brief story about when when I was younger, I was raised going to Sunday school and in a Christian Lutheran church, and was told that women had more ribs than men because God had taken a rib from Adam to make Eve. And so I went my entire life, for many, many years, repeating that story and telling other people that story until I got into an anatomy and physiology class when I repeated that story. And yes, this response right here that I'm seeing with people laughing, that's the entire class busted out with laughing. I had this piece of gossip that I had heard and listened to and passed on, and I didn't know. And so I think there are also things that you can't necessarily know if you're breaking this precept sometimes. And then we've already heard some folks talk about these white lies that we tell, oh, I love your gross beef sandwich, it was delicious. No, it wasn't delicious. And if I say I loved your gross beef sandwich, you're going to serve me gross beef sandwich again. But that's not necessarily a harmful lie, right? Or a harmful lack of truth. It's a lack of truth, and there's probably some karma around it. You might get laughed at in your A&P class, but it's not necessarily harmful. And even some truths can be noble. We can have these like noble untruths, like money has value, right? That little piece of paper in your hand is so valuable. That $20 one, they look all the same, but this one that has this 100 on it is worth more than this one that has this 1 on it. And that's just a big lie that we tell to ourselves so that we can make trading a lot easier. And then, boy, don't even get into like digital bank accounts and stuff, because that's another big, huge, crazy lie that we do so that we can make life easier for trade. So these are all lies that maybe we can tell to each other, but we also lie to ourselves, right? So a lot of us have had situations in our lives that have caused us to think that folks will reject us if we aren't true to ourselves. And so we can lie by putting on a veneer of who we are in business settings. That's really true. I don't present with blue hair at work. I love my blue hair, but I can't wear it at work. I wear a wig, so I'm presenting a bit of a lie. There are a lot of other circumstances where you might not be able to just be your normal crazy self because you may have some concerns about whether or not you'll be accepted in those circumstances. Roshi Nancy Mujo Baker said, perhaps all lying is manipulating situations to our advantage, whether the advantage is protection of whatever I take myself to be or a promotion of what I want others to take me to be. Our lies are linked to our agendas. And the lies we tell others are often easier to identify than the ones that we tell to ourselves. One of the things I like to do a lot is tell myself stories, especially if I'm having a bad day. So I might tell myself, I'm a huge failure. Oh, nobody cares about me, or nobody likes me. I'm worthless. She hates me. She thinks I'm a fraud. Things are never going to get better. Or, somebody moved my cup that I'm looking for, that's probably one of the most common ones, is somebody's messing with me. They did something. If I can't find it, or if I made a mistake, obviously somebody else went into my spreadsheet and messed up that one cell that's, 3,000 lines in. No. Again, it's all about our agendas and how we're protecting ourselves. I usually try not to compound that error by sharing those stories, but sometimes I share them. One of my favorite techniques for pulling out of that spiral, because we can sometimes get ourselves into these big like self-hatred story spirals, is to ask myself, and this came from the work of Byron Katie, is to ask myself, is it true? Can it be absolutely 100% true? What evidence do I have that it's true? What evidence do I have that it's untrue? And sometimes that untrue, looking for that untrue evidence, is stronger evidence. Well, she doesn't hate me because she just invited me to go to a show. There's a lot of things that we can do to test and see what is honest, what's truth. And me being me, I can honestly say that I am never 100% sure that anything is true or untrue. Maybe 99% on occasion, but never 100%. So how do we know when something's untrue? And I put that question out there for maybe a couple of responses, because I know my time's getting a little limited here. But do a couple people, maybe, would you be interested in sharing what are some of your techniques to know if things are true?
This is a great talk. I love your quotes. And like Byron Katie, asking ourselves, you really described attachment, when we're attached to the delusion that, of course, our perspective is correct. Then we don't go any further. So both these talks support each other. The ungilded is the integrity. And so I guess one of my delusions is, like Byron Katie's, is for me to say, well, what happens if the worst case scenario occurs? How am I, my small self, how am I deflated? How am I really? What's at stake?
Thank you, Ruth Ann. Anyone else have a technique they'd like to share?
Well, one of my favorite ones is like testing between what's scientifically true as a fact and what's possibly relatively true as like moral. This is some kind of truth that's out there. So my favorite one is it dark outside? Well, yes, but if I'm writing on a piece of paper, it's dark outside and it's actually light outside. Which one's true?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, testing, direct observation.
Yeah, go test it in all sorts of ways.
So I want to come back to this picture here, this lovely flower. So going back to, here's a lovely flower and it has dew on it even. So how pertinent is this? But it's not really a flower. It's a picture of a flower. It's a bunch of pixels, and that flower, it has been gone for a very long time. Symbols aren't reality. Teiko also talked about that in her talk. So anytime we are using symbols, we're not really in reality. Additionally, sometimes we can tell if something is really off by listening to our bodies, to how our bodies respond to things. So for example, if I'm trying to pull one over on somebody, I might feel a little elated and excited about that. There's how much more, when are we wrapping up? Are we 4 minutes? Okay. trying to decide if I want to go into this story. So I'm going to tell you a little story that I used to like to tell about a time that I broke into a church down the street. I found an open window and climbed into it. I didn't do anything particularly interesting, just kind of snooping around. But I didn't know that the pastor was actually there and heard me wandering around. And when I realized that he was there, I went to go run back to the window. But of course, my pattering made him hear where I was at. So he came after me and got back to the window and started climbing out. But then he grabbed my leg and started pulling and continued to pull my leg. And he just kept pulling my leg, just like I'm pulling yours right now. So this type of humor is actually one of my favorite types of humor. And lies can be included in that, and it can be exhilarating. I had a lot of fun telling you guys that. I loved seeing your faces respond to it. It's exhilarating. At the same time, though, if I'm repeating something I'm not really sure about, it can feel really yucky. My stomach doesn't feel so good. Because I know that, it might be a half truth or something that I'm telling. So we can often really rely on our bodies to help us to tell whether something's truthful or not. And certainly in order to be able to communicate truthfully, we have to know what truth is. Peter spoke a little bit about direct observation. That's a good way of knowing ish, because we also have to recognize that our perspective takes a role, right? If we're wearing, I don't know, do you guys have these I have a pair of sunglasses that whenever I look at clouds, they're this beautiful color of pink. And if I had only ever known that those sunglasses and never seen clouds without those sunglasses, I might think that clouds are just pink, and I might argue that. So we all see this world through this lens that we have in our lives. And I think the pandemic and our response to the pandemic is a really great example of this. We live in a world where we can create a life where we don't have to interact with people who have perspectives that are different than ours, which creates this sort of echo chamber, right? Yeah, Peter, you were talking about that with your prime minister as well, right?
Mm.
We favor sources of information that confirm our perspective. And sometimes it can be really hard to hear perspectives that are different than ours, especially if we hold very, very strongly to our own personal truths. I'm going to skip a little bit here. But there's definitely some division that's happening, and the pandemic can look a lot different, or there are responses to the pandemics and the decisions that we make can look a lot different depending upon who we are. A shutdown looks a lot different if you are the administrator of a hospital than it does if you are a small business owner who just put absolutely everything into a restaurant that is, now going to suffer. It's really complex and there are many trade-offs. We can't treat it like a zero-sum game. Truth is not a zero-sum game. It's not if you have more truth, I have less truth. It's more complex. It is the little droplets of dew everywhere. And I have a little note about, for those of you, I don't know if you all have seen A Beautiful Mind. That's a movie about this mathematician, John Forbes Nash. He shared a Nobel Prize in economics because of his theories on non-cooperative games. So you can think about life as everybody has their own agenda, right? It's kind of a big non-cooperative game. And what he discovered is that if we stay with what we need and make sure that we take other people's needs into perspective, that we're more likely to come out with a good outcome. So I'm going to leave it at that. I took up more time than I had. Thank you for those who were able to stay on. I think that's all I got.
Thank you, Emelie, and thank you to both you and Shokai for your very thoughtful presentations on these two precepts. Next week, I'll be talking about Nehan, and then the following week, Penny will have Do Not Become Intoxicated, and Choan will have Do Not Dwell on Past Mistakes. All right. Do we do a verse? We'll do a verse. Abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prajna paramita. It was lovely to see you all tonight. We'll see you next week.